America would be better off if more Americans worked in manufacturing. Most people agree. I would be better off if I worked in manufacturing. Most people disagree. There you have it. Plain as day, literally could not spell it out more clearly. Yes, I want manufacturing to come back. No, I will not work in manufacturing. I saw this and I actually thought it was interesting enough that I wanted to talk about it. Shoutouts to one of my favorite political scientists on the internet, Polling USA, which I think also runs the account for Polling Canada. I'm not 100% sure. Regardless, they are a polling aggregator and political scientist. So this again, it was just like a random thing on my feed. Voters are critical of some aspects of modernity, positive about others. Voters. And somebody actually mentions here, they kind of spoil it. Crazy that so many people endorse suburbanism. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the breakdown. Can I zoom in on this? I'll just make this full screen. You'll hear the Mystery Dungeon music in the background. Voters, in your opinion, have each of the following had a mostly positive or mostly negative impact on life in the US? Right? So you have very positive in the deep green, and then somewhat positive ranging to, don't know, somewhat negative, very negative, right? Green to red, pretty intuitive to see. This is the Likert scale thing. So for the positive side, we have the US becoming more multicultural and diverse. Overwhelmingly positive, net plus 50. This is what, voters ostensibly believe, according to a survey from Data for Progress here of 1,259 likely US voters. Again, polls are difficult to do. They're going to be lagging indicators if they indicate anything at all. So this is probably indicative, if of anything, of the state of people's opinions maybe a couple months ago, right? The US joining international organizations like NATO and the World Trade Organization. Very favorable, plus 49. Americans increased access to retail giants like Amazon, Walmart, and Dollar General, plus 46. The US economy becoming more globally interconnected, plus 37. Again, we're starting to see the incoherence. This is just a rephrased version of this. You name drop the NATO and the WTO, plus 49. You say economically interconnected globally, plus 37. It's the same question. Americans increasingly living in suburban developments, plus 35. I will come back to this because I have some choice words for that. Not for the methodology. I genuinely believe that this is more or less reflective of what people believe and how they feel about these things. No, my choice words will be for the people of America. Much of Americans' food being produced and delivered through an efficient global supply chain, plus 22. Many Americans delaying marriage to later in life, plus 18. It's because it's a pipe dream, it's designed that way. Yeah. Well, I'll get to that, but yes, that is part of it. Now we get to the negative stuff. Development of artificial intelligence. Somewhat negative at minus 4, right? People are pretty split on this, according to this survey, but again, lagging indicator. And your average person has no fucking idea what AI is. So it's possible people are still buying into the hype and whatever. People also think AI, and they probably think a real artificial intelligence, like a sentient machine from the Matrix, and not like ChatGPT giving your kid instructions on how to kill themselves. In fact, I think this survey, September 12th to 15th, 2025. That's when the survey was conducted. So I think this happened before that kid killed themselves as a result of instructions from ChatGPT. Like ChatGPT became a suicide coach. I think this happened before that. So this is likely different now. U.S. jobs largely shifting from agriculture and manufacturing to information technology and services. Somewhat negative, -9. Was it a white man? I don't fucking know. I mean, probably. It was a teenage kid. They were high school aged. Again, this is another thing that I will come back to. Bring back the manufacturing jobs. Americans increase consumption of material goods, -10. This I'm mixed on, but again, this shows some contradictions with some other stuff on this list. Americans increase consumption of medications to treat pain, mental health, and other conditions, -25. Americans increase use of social media and digital technology, -29. People, we're in the territory of people really not liking this stuff now. Declining number of Americans identifying as religious, -32. Classic religion L. You know, by the way, a sufficient number of Americans are non-religious that people answered this negatively who weren't religious. Yeah, base. This should be no more people identifying as religious. We got better shit to do. Americans spending a greater percentage of their time indoors, -42. Okay, now we can start to unpack the sheer, like, harebrainedness of the mind of Americans in the aggregate to produce a list that looks like this of their opinions on the current socioeconomic landscape, right? There's some stuff here that's like pretty inoffensive and like good, actually. For example, internationalism is good. That's crazy. You know? Same with the global supply chain, as flawed as it is, and as much as capitalism has done its best to make it worse and turn it into a mess of tape and wires that barely functions, the fact that we have a global supply chain is a good thing. I'm actually kind of surprised in positively that people are mostly perfectly fine with people delaying marriage to later in life if they get married at all. Now we get to the really wacky stuff. This this question here is evidence of how much Americans have drank the suburbanite Kool-Aid. The fucking, oh, living in suburbia is good. The white picket fence narrative is unfortunately still alive. We need to do narrative manufacturing harder. 1 billion affordable housing units in the city. Everybody will have a nice townhouse or apartment in the city, or a house in a small town around other houses, and nobody will be like in a properly developed world, right? In a good world, suburbia would not exist. And I'll stick by that, because suburbia is a purely antisocial mode of urban development, right? Suburbia exists as distinct from a social community, right? Like it is defined by zoning purely for residential buildings, most often like low to maybe middle density, you know, detached houses to maybe like townhomes or duplexes with no commercial zoning around, and it's entirely designed around like car infrastructure. Yeah, suburbia is the entire, like, suburbia and the interstate highway system are mutually codependent on each other. They reinforce the other, and like without one, the other can't exist. And both of them have made life, I would say immeasurably, but it's quite measurable how much worse they've made people's lives. So, you know, the brain of the average American is cooked ×1 for the suburbia question. Now we get to Americans being cooked ×2. U.S. jobs largely shifting from agriculture and manufacturing to information technology and services. I have news for people. Agriculture is like, doesn't require that many workers in relation to other sectors, right? By nature of what agriculture is, a large field where you're growing food, there's going to be a way lower density of workers per like product output than for any other sector that you would see in, I don't know, a city. And this is purely again drinking the Kool-Aid and like 20th century, mid-century virtue signaling, right? America was a manufacturing powerhouse in the 20th century. But manufacturing jobs fucking suck. Nobody talks about this. I'm genuinely, I don't know why nobody talks about this. Manufacturing jobs suck. Working in a factory, those are strenuous ass conditions. In like an industrial workshop setting, that is a strenuous ass set of conditions that we are all aware of. We all know the horrors that unfolded in the early 20th century, pre-New Deal factory conditions with child labor and like people losing limbs about like from using dangerous machinery with very few safety regulations and shit like that. That is manufacturing work. It's dangerous. It sucks. It's intensive. You know, combine that with the long hours that people work. Genuinely, the only reason that people in America can work as long of hours as they do is because they're working service and IT jobs that don't demand necessarily that much of you physically as a manufacturing job would. That's not to say that you won't be doing some heavy lifting or whatever if you're in the service sector, right? That's just to say that like there's such a difference in physical strain that it puts your body and mind under, like constantly. So this again, like this is purely harebrained, right? There are still, you can go, if you really want to, you can look up the kind of sweatshop conditions that exist in the United States, by the way. A lot of migrant laborers, because of their fears of potential negative run-in with the law, they have a hard time finding a job. They're forced to work in sweatshop conditions, in the few manufacturing operations for textiles and like, I don't know, fucking hair ties and scrunchies that exists like on the West Coast particularly. That's what manufacturing labor looks like. And we've automated a lot of it too. Even with the automation, manufacturing labor is still like, it really sucks. We don't want to bring those jobs back. We want the jobs we have to be able to support people. That's what we want, right? Or that's what people should want. And that's what needs to happen economically for this country to, you know, get turned around. They replace you with a robot because they can work forever and don't need paychecks. Yeah, and robots, like a machine, does not have rights and protections the way a human worker does. It's just less dangerous to have a machine doing something partially automated in a factory than for a person to be doing that by hand, right? So like jobs were automated, jobs were outsourced because we still need all that stuff being manufactured. We just don't need people in such horrid conditions that like every few years there are massive strikes. Another thing that made manufacturing jobs worth it that would result in us absolutely not wanting them to come back nowadays is because they had union protections back in the day. And we don't now, not really anyways, even with the resurgence in labor organizing. So, you know, Americans, you don't actually want manufacturing jobs back. Nobody fucking likes manufacturing jobs except for the people who don't work manufacturing jobs. This is how you know, by the way, that people don't want, like, that people don't work manufacturing jobs in America because they want to bring them back. The moment the manufacturing jobs come back, they're gonna be like, all right, who wants to work at the factory? Nobody's gonna raise their fucking hand. Yeah, the pipe, and it's a pipe dream that's being sold to them. And the actual pipe dream here, like, the actual thing that you're idolizing with the return of manufacturing jobs is not the manufacturing. It's the fucking union protections and fair wages, you know? Even nowadays, manufacturing, because of when manufacturing was the most relevant sector in America, it still has pretty robust wage standards and union protections. Shit, I've looked at some manufacturing jobs, and almost across the board, they pay higher and have a larger proportion of full-time status than entry-level service jobs, right? So higher wages, better benefits, right? Because they have a benefits package at all. The problem is the nature of the work itself, right? Long shifts, potentially an overnight shift, like late into the evening or very early in the morning, 8 hours straight of like, well, back-breaking labor. And that's why the wages and benefits are the way that they are, because people were like, no, we won't do this unless you give us these benefits. And, they unionized much earlier. The service sector only really developed a lot later when unions had already fallen off a cliff, as a result of the government cracking down on labor organizing, albeit indirectly through enabling companies to just not let unions organize, Basically, what I'm saying is, shut up, Americans. You don't miss manufacturing jobs. You miss being in a union. Increased consumption of material goods. I feel a mixed way about this. I guess it's probably the correct sentiment to be like, yeah, we consume a lot of shit, right? What was I gonna say about that? I had something of a thought like very well formed, and then it just kind of left me. Oh yeah, because of like online shopping and targeted advertising or whatever, there's so much stuff in America particularly that is designed to just get you to buy shit, right? And that is extremely detrimental. I think everybody can realize that the way that advertising has evolved in America incentivizes way the fuck more, I guess you could call, frivolous purchasing, right? And that's not an indictment of anybody that engages in frequent small purchases or even mid-sized or large purchases, because the whole system is designed to tell you to do that, It's made super easy to buy something. Hell, to such an extent that like with Klarna and these other fucking buy now, pay later schemes for something that costs as much as a fucking pizza, right? Now it's like, oh, you don't even have to have the money to buy things. We just want you to keep spending and spending and spending, so that way money can still cycle around while we're siphoning more and more of it to the top. You just go into debt doing it. That is extremely detrimental. That's the one thing. The one small positive I see over like people consuming a lot of material things specifically, as they specify, as opposed to like digital goods, is that that's something real, right? Like if you buy a tasty burrito, you can actually eat that. Like that's good, right? Yeah, you can now go in debt for pizza of all things. But still, I think, yeah, largely this is pretty bad. The fact that there's such a crisis of overconsumption and the incentivization of buying so much in America. But that lands squarely on like advertisers and the business model that America relies on. That is to say capitalism, market incentives. We have to make line go up, and our line going up is contingent on investment and people buying things. So we have to get people to buy stuff as much as possible, even if they don't have the money for it, because otherwise that's not going to look good to our investors. Basically the entire thing is a bubble economy, right? If line stops going up, investors and shareholders are going to be like, I don't know about that one, chief. And they're going to pull their investment out, and the company could go kaput. It could genuinely ruin a company's finances if they don't consistently have line going up. And in order to make that line go up, they have to plunge people, they have to incentivize people to go further and further and further into debt to support the bottom line of the company, right? It is a toxic set of incentives all around. It puts you in debt. The company is barely scraping by. The executives are walking away with the bag. They can fail as much as they want. It won't matter because their wealth is measured in debt. You get me. I've said this a million times before. Americans increase consumption of medication to treat pain, mental health, and other conditions. This, I think, is partially a load of horse shit. Because, like, damn, that's crazy. people take medicine. What? I don't know how, like, on one level, I genuinely don't know why people would take an issue with this. You know, some of it strikes me as like oh, back in my day, we didn't have antidepressants. We just like hit our wives or something. I don't know. I don't know what else that could be about, really. Increased consumption of medications to treat pain, mental health, and other conditions. I don't know. Maybe it's gesturing to some kind of opioid epidemic thing. This is one that I actually like genuinely have a hard time understanding why people would think this. I hesitate to even guess that, like, oh, maybe it's conservatives saying like, haha, don't take antidepressants, just man up. Because it doesn't seem like that sort of bias is reflected in a lot of these other ones. I genuinely can't figure this one out. If somebody has a guess, this might become a segment on YouTube. If anybody has a guess as to what this could mean here, let me know. Yeah, like, what's your point? Why are you telling me how life was in the past? Why does that have to do with modern society, right? Yeah, it's a nostalgic feeling for like a past they imagined was better than it actually was, right? Increased use of social media and digital technology. This one's a pretty straightforward W. Social media has devolved into a fucking blighted hellscape of infinite scrolling and like fucking Nazi vice signal posters and whatever the fuck else. You know, the White House and the Department of various federal departments posting like AI generated memes, which is just white nationalist propaganda with the like Aryan square-jawed worker looking stoically at the viewer or whatever. So that tracks. Declining number of Americans identifying as religious. People are negative on that. El Bozos. Also, I will bring back the point that a sufficient percentage of Americans identify as non-religious now, that somebody was asked this question who identifies as non-religious and answered, yeah, I think it's bad that people are identifying as non-religious. Which makes this a similar version of the, like, a similar question to, like, the manufacturing jobs question, where it's like, yeah, we should bring back the manufacturing jobs, but I wouldn't work a manufacturing jobs. That this one's like, it's pure like bullshit nostalgia coded, pure irrational thought. Like, yeah, more people should identify as religious, but I'm not religious. Like, Americans' brains are cooked times whatever. There's probably like 5 or 6 already. Americans spending a greater percentage of their time indoors. Yeah, this one's pretty straightforwardly, like, I agree that one's not great either. Isolation is never good on a large scale. You know, people spending more time indoors, it's not because of like, oh, I don't know, it's winter or something, so you spend more time indoors during the winter. It's referring to like a new working paradigm, you know? A new like working pattern where more people work from home, and the sort of social structure that was associated with urban and even to some extent suburban life has deteriorated just because of like, it's almost like the direction that technology has evolved in because of market incentives, the incentive to get you to keep scrolling, has also evolved to keep you inside because that's where you do the scrolling. And if you're outside socializing, if you have better things to do, or if there's like, if you don't have anything else to do but like go outside and, I don't know, go on a nice walk, go on your morning constitutional, or like go grab lunch with a friend or something, you know, if you do that, then you're not scrolling. So the incentive is to make you not do that and make you want to just keep scrolling. So yeah, I agree with that bottom bit right there. Gonna go to the Zootopia 2 movie, mostly just to get out of the house. Nice. I really like that plan. Thankfully, I'm living in an area that's actually very walkable now, and it's not a wealthy area, but it is walkable, so I don't have a hard time sort of justifying getting out of the house every couple of days. That's good, or even every day, depending on like how much work I have in a week. So all in all, there are a lot like there are some issues where like your average person can pretty clearly see that there's a problem and will be able to correctly identify what the problem is generally, but this is also an indication of how cooked the brain of the average American is, right? Like being positive on suburbia and wanting manufacturing jobs to come back, but also agreeing that like globalization in a diplomatic and economic sense is a good thing, right? Like the increased presence of retail and the increase of the prominence of the global supply chain and global interconnectedness are fundamentally at odds with the aspiration to bring back manufacturing jobs, right? Like these two are not compatible. But Americans support both of those positions at the same time because your average person is politically incoherent. Yeah, supporting suburbia is inherently anti-walkable cities. Unironically, this at the bottom, spending a greater percentage of their time indoors, being negative on this is inherently at odds with liking suburbia. If you like suburbia, that means you have to be okay with spending a large percentage of your time indoors. Those two are intrinsically linked, but most people aren't consistent in their beliefs. If you were consistent in your beliefs, you would hate suburbia and hate, modern social media incentivizing infinite doom scrolling, right? But Americans, again, the brain of your average American is completely cooked. So they're like, yes, I like suburbia. No, I don't like staying inside all the time. Then why the fuck do you like suburbia? Anyways, now let's go to a second graph, which is related to the first one. This is, again, from Polling USA. So this one is a more detailed breakdown of the question about manufacturing jobs. A plurality, I realize my webcam is blocking some of this. Hopefully it's fine. You can see most of it either way. A plurality of voters feel negatively about the transition, L grammar, it's negatively, not negative, about the transition in the United States to a service economy. This actually, I think I saw this earlier, this exactly confirms the point that I made, where it's people saying, yes, we should bring manufacturing jobs back, but no, I will not work a manufacturing job, right? It has a breakdown by gender and voting preference, right? Which presidential candidate you voted for. And we're going to look at the difference between men who voted for Kamala Harris. You can see it's plus 10 in favor of, transitioning to a service economy is a good thing. And then let's look at women who voted for Trump, who by a margin of minus 23 here say, no, we should bring back the manufacturing jobs. I don't like the service economy. These are not the people working manufacturing jobs. I'm going out on a limb here with my knowledge of economic statistics. The Trump voting women are not in the factories. Some of the Harris voting men might be in the factories, but overwhelmingly the people in the factories are probably going to be the Trump voting men, or at least it's going to lean more that way, right? And they're only like -4. That's like pretty evenly split on whether the service economy is good or bad, actually, which is kind of surprising to me. But yeah, again, it's like, yeah, the service economy is good. On the one hand, you have the correct take that yes, the service economy is a good thing, and it just needs to be like, you don't get paid fucking poverty wages for that shit. And on the other hand, you have the Yes, we should bring back manufacturing jobs. No, I will not work a manufacturing job. Type shit. Hey, and this even confirms that this is largely an aspiration to the union benefits that are associated with manufacturing jobs rather than the jobs themselves. Nobody actually wants to work a factory job. Um, you know, uh, what people want is the economic security that is associated with working a factory job because, again, consistently higher wages and better benefits and union membership. You can see here, under 50,000 household income, much more negative on the transition to a service economy than households making over $50,000. And I didn't see this part of the breakdown in the graph before. Like, this is purely just like, wow, damn, that's crazy. I love being correct. Yeah, look, this is a Statista graph that even breaks it down exactly what I was saying. Americans want manufacturing, but they don't want to work in manufacturing. And then they want to deport the people who would work in manufacturing. I can speak to this from a secondhand personal experience. A family member of mine worked in manufacturing, older family member, worked in a, not necessarily in manufacturing themselves, they were in the personnel department of a textile manufacturer. Their entire life, they worked there. And they had a very high turnover rate of domestic workers, you know, American citizens. They had a high turnover rate because of like 12-hour shifts or some shit like that. But consistently, they would have very low turnover of immigrant workers because the immigrant workers would be earning a much higher wage in America compared to wages in much poorer countries where they would be coming from, right? I'm telling you, manufacturing fucking sucks to work in. Share of U.S. respondents disagreeing with the following statements in U.S. manufacturing. America would be better off if more Americans worked in manufacturing. Most people agree. I would be better off if I worked in manufacturing. Most people disagree. There you have it. Plain as day, literally could not spell it out more clearly. And this one has even more respondents than the previous one. 2,570 respondents to this survey. Yes, I want manufacturing to come back. No, I will not work in manufacturing. It's almost the same exact split. Also, shoutouts to the GigaChads who answered, no, America would not be better off if manufacturing came back. Yes, I will work in manufacturing. Does not elaborate, leaves. So the moral of the story, I guess, once again, is that Americans are stupid and they will take whatever narrative you give them. This is the narrative they have been given, is that manufacturing should come back. We really ought to put some elbow grease into giving them a different narrative. Like, hey, you know, working the receptionist counter at a clothing boutique is fine, actually. You should just be paid enough to afford rent in your apartment for that, right? Like, there's no fundamental reason that wages need to be so much lower on average for entry-level service jobs than entry-level manufacturing jobs. But they are, right? They don't need to be, but they are, because of the lack of unionization that's associated with the service industry, and how many of those jobs as well are part-time. You know, another part of the crackdown on labor organizing, because oftentimes unions don't include part-time workers. Anyways, I thought that was good to look at. Fuck manufacturing. We need manufacturing, but fuck manufacturing. We don't need to bring that back. We need to we just need to fucking arrest every billionaire under the sun, take money out of the speculative economy, outlaw the stock market, do 21st century socialism in America. Everything is an employee-owned cooperative, etc., etc. The people will work 20 hours a week, if that, for a full wage. You will be able to afford rent in your apartment. You will have a nice time with a friend at lunch. I will now end the segment at the risk of rambling further. Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.